Jai Om Vishnupada Padmahamsa Jacacharya Totara Sakasishibadin Vaigashesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Antakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Sri Caitanya Charitamrita Ki Oh, glorious assemble of devotees, oh, glorious assemble of devotees, oh, glorious assemble of devotees, oh, glorious Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga, Gaur Premananda, Hari Hari, Go. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda So we have now progressed to Adi-lila chapter 11, and chapter 10 was the Caitanya family tree, and now we're talking about Lord Nityananda's tree here, chapter 11. Sub-branches of Nityananda Mahaprabhu. So text number 8. Shri Virabhadra Goswami Skanda Mahasaka Shri Virabhadra Goswami Skanda Mahasaka Tanra Upakasak upasakayata sankyataraleka.
Tanna upasakayata sankyataraleka.
Shri Virabhadra Gosani Skanda Mahasaka.
Shri Virabhadra Gosani Skanda Mahasaka.
Tanra upasakayata asankyataraleka.
Tanra upasakayata asankyataraleka.
Shri Virabhadra Gosani Skanda Mahasaka.
Shri Virabhadra Gosani Skanda Mahasaka.
Tanra upasakayata asankyataraleka.
Tanra upasakayata asankyataraleka.
Shri Virabhadra Gosani of the name Shri Virabhadra Gosani. Skanda of the trunk. Mahashaka, the biggest branch. Tanra, his. Upashaka, sub-branches. Yata, all. Ashankya, innumerable. Tara, of that. Leka, the description. Translation. After Nityananda Prabhu, the greatest branch is Virabhadra Gosani, who also has innumerable branches and sub-branches. It is not possible to describe them all. Purport. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes Virabhadra Gosani as the direct son of Srila Nityananda Prabhu and the disciple of Janavadevi. His real mother was Vasudha. In the Guru Ganadesh Dipika, verse 67, he is mentioned as an incarnation of Shiradoksai Vishnu. Therefore, Virabhadra Gosani is not different from Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In a village of the name Jamatapura in the district of Ugali, Virabhadra Gosani had a disciple named Yadunatacharya, who had two daughters, a real daughter named Srimati and a foster daughter named Narayani. Both these daughters married and they are mentioned in the Bhakti Ratnakara, chapter 13. Virabhadra Gosani had three disciples who were celebrated as his sons, Gopi Janavallabha, Ramakrishna and Ramachandra. The youngest, Ramachandra, belonged to the Sandilya dynasty and the surname Bhattavilya. He established his family at Kadadaha, and its members are known as the Goswamis of Kadadaha. The eldest disciple, Gopi Janavallabha, was a resident of the village known as Lata, near the Manakara railway station in the district of Burdwan. The second, Ramakrishna, lived near Malada in a village named Gayasapura. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur notes that since these three disciples belonged to different gotras or dynasties and also had different surnames and lived in different places, it's not possible to accept them as the real sons of Virabhadra Gosani. Ramachandra had four sons, of whom the eldest was Ramadevi. His third son was named Yadavendra. Yadavendra's son was Nanda Kishora. His son was Nidhi Krishna. His son was Chaitanya Chanda. His son was Krishna Mohan. His son was Jagan Mohan. His son was Rajanath. And his son was Shyamala Goswami. This is the genealogical table given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur for the descendants of Virabhadra Gosani. I did a quick mental calculation with all the sons and grandsons and great-grandsons, and I figure on an average, if everyone was like the Acharya or whatever for like 30 or 40 years, that would take them practically up to the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So it was a genealogy of about 300 or 400 years. So for a large part of this, Srila Prabhupada talks about genealogy, so perhaps we should discuss this before we talk about Virabhadra Gosani. So what's very critical here is that it's said that these three devotees, Ramachandra, Ramakrishna and Gopijanavalabha, they were like sons of Virabhadra Goswami, but they weren't actually biological sons, they were genealogical sons. So therefore his gotra was from his disciples, because actually, as the proof was given here by Srila Prabhupada, they all lived in different towns, had different surnames, so whatever. So this is very much similar to where we have come from also, that we are also sons and daughters of Srila Prabhupada, we say that. And so when people ask for our gotra, Prabhupada has advised us to say that we come from the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya gotra, like that. So we're in the disciplic succession. So there was a discussion just a few weeks ago about gotras, that there are two. There's the biological one, and as you can see that this gotra that was started by these sons of Ramachandra, they went right through, and they're probably existing to this day. And in India also, you find that you talk to so many devotees who you meet in the temples, and their gotras go right back to the Goswamis or descendants from there, or the descendants from their disciples. So they're very, very strong gotras. So that's the first one, the biological one, and of course our gotra, we are just trying to make it very, very strong, and in our succession, if we follow the instructions of the gurus, that our sampradaya becomes our gotra, and we become very strong. Because apart from that, what else do we have? We all come from different backgrounds, different situations, sometimes very disturbing situations where we come from, fled from one country to another, and so on and so forth. But ultimately it doesn't matter. If we take shelter of Krishna, take shelter of the spiritual master, then we have our own gotra, and we're very strong, and we can be very proud of it. We don't have to be ashamed. We're actually very fortunate to be involved in this disciplic succession. But in the beginning here, we're talking about Nityananda Prabhu's son, Virabhadra Goswami. Now, up to a few months ago, this would have just been 2 lines on the page about Virabhadra. Okay, he was the son of Nityananda. But due to the great fortune of Indradumna Maharaj doing a series of lectures about all the great souls that succeeded the 6 Goswamis, we have found out so much more information about Virabhadra Goswami that indeed this is Virabhadra, or sometimes called him Virachandra. He was an extraordinary devotee. In fact, he was an incarnation of Kshirodaksha Vishnu. So that is amazing, because first of all we have Krishna, he's the original. From Krishna comes Sankarshan, and then from Sankarshan comes Kshirodaksha Vishnu. And Kshirodaksha Vishnu is seated in everybody's heart. And this Kshirodaksha Vishnu took birth as the son of Lord Nityananda. And sometimes we would say, well, why isn't this such a big deal? It's such a prominent personality. How is it that we don't know much about his life? Well, the fact was he came as a devotee. In the same fashion, he's also compared to Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. He came in the same fashion as Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. He came as a devotee. So he was very humble. He did not make any big waves. And he was a great preacher. He just preached Krishna consciousness. In fact, Krishna Das Kaviraj is at a dilemma. There's so much information about him that I've requested to sort of continue on the next Chaitanya Charitamrita reading, which we're not sure where it is, because there's so many festivals going on, and so anyway, and it's in the Codicy. So Virabhadra Goswami, he presented himself as a great devotee, and although Supreme Personality of God is transcendental all Vedic injunctions, he strictly followed the Vedic rituals. And then Krishnadas Kaviraj describes him as the main pillar in the hall of devotional service erected by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He knew within himself that he acted as the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but externally he was prideless. And this amazing verse here, it is by the glorious mercy of Sri Virabhadra Goswami that people all over the world have now the chance to chant the names of Caitanya and Nityananda. So this is the first and foremost trunk of the tree of Nityananda Mahaprabhu, and he is a very, very prominent figure. So there is so much information now that has come out about him that wasn't there before, and there's even more information that was available. There was a book that was written about him, but unfortunately that is no longer available. But just to begin with, that as it said here, Lord Nityananda, he was preaching all over South India, and then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took him aside and said, "You should take to Grihastha Ashram to facilitate your preaching." So Nityananda obliged, and he married two sisters, which we have described here. They were Janavamata and Vasudha. Yeah, so Vasudha was the younger sister of Janavamata. Janavamata was such an amazing personality that she actually became the Acharya of the Vaishnava movement after Lord Chaitanya passed away. There's so much description about her too. You could do a whole lecture series on Janavamata. So in this case, Vasudha became pregnant with Virabhadra, and said that she carried the pregnancy for 15 months in the womb. So she was very, very radiant. And then finally, when Vira Chandra, we call him Virabhadra, well, baby Vira Chandra, because he was as bright as 1,000 moons, appeared. He was effulgent. He looked like a golden lotus. He had all the prolific signs of divinity. He had arms down to his knees. His waist was slender. His thighs were like that of a lion, and he also had markings on the bottom of his feet. He had the flag, the goad, and the thunderbolt. So he also had a sweet smile. You know, when little children, little babies smile, they were just completely overwhelming, irresistible. So this was the baby, and he was the darling of the whole of Navadvip. And as he grew up, it's said that he blossomed like a lotus flower. So you see a lotus flower is all closed up, and then when the sun comes out, it opens up into this beautiful flower. So it became more and more beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that the demigods and the sages from all the other planets, they would come to see him, and they would come as devotees. They would be incognito, and they would pay their respects. So he grew up in this way, had a normal childhood in Navadvip, but one point in time, at a young age, he decided that he needed to be initiated, that he was always chanting the holy names. He was always conscious, like totally conscious of the Supreme Being. And as he became older, he sought out his friends, and he said, "Let's go to Shantipur." So they all hopped on the boat, and when they were on the boat, they said, "Where are we going? What are we going to do?" He said, "I'm going to be initiated by Advaita Acharya." So they took off, and they started this loud chanting. At that point in time, Janava Mata was sitting on the bank, and Janava Mata is his aunt, and she's very, very astute, and she understood the mindset of this boy, and she had other plans. So then, once they took off on the boat, she said she had a servant, and his name was Chandrasekhar, and she said to Chandrasekhar, "Quick, bring him back." So Chandrasekhar got his friend Minikaitan Ram, and they went running down the bank, trying to stop Virabhadra from crossing the river and going to Shantipur. Now, this Minikaitan Ram was an extraordinary fellow, he was an extraordinary devotee, that it said like he was an old Caitanya, that he had a flute with 14 knots that he used to play, and this was a magic flute that he could perform so many wonderful activities with that flute. And not only that, but he carried Balaram in this heavy Sringasan on his back. Wherever he went, he had Lord Balaram and the Sringasan, and he would go everywhere. It said that as he got older, he couldn't carry Lord Balaram. Sometimes you see devotees on Parikram from Russia or somewhere, or Ukraine or Croatia. They're carrying a Sringasan of the deities on their head, and they stop and they put the deities down. So he was carrying the deities, and when he couldn't carry them anymore, he put them with Gauranga in Katwa. There's a temple there, and Lord Gauranga's still there. I think Balaram's still there. So that was just a bit of a squirrel there. But so he's there, and they're yelling, "Come back, come back, come back!" And Virabhadra was having such a loud kirtan with all his friends that they couldn't hear. So Minikaitan Ram became very, very angry. He picked up his flute and he threw it at the boat, and it hit the boat, and the boat split in half, right? Now get this, the boat's sinking, so Virabhadra gets off the boat and he walks across the Ganges, walks across the water back to shore in his wooden platform shoes. He just walked back. And all the other boys swam back. And then when he came back, he saw Janava Mata sitting there. And she had this radiant effulgence, and he was immediately attracted to her. And as he was coming towards her, she was chanting her japa. Now, Pradyumna Maharaj describes a little bit of a lesson that we learned from this. So she was chanting japa, and she didn't want to be interrupted. In those days, japa is like a sacrifice that you don't interrupt. So to facilitate the boy coming, she manifested 2 more sets of arms. So with 2 arms she chanted a japa, with the other 2 arms she held a veil, and with the other 2 arms she held a plough and a rod, I think. And she was there, and he saw that he was just like astounded, and she held that position for a few seconds and disappeared. She came back to her original form. That was enough to actually amaze him, and he surrendered to her, and he said, "I'm so sorry if I've committed any offences, could you please initiate me?" So at that point in time, then and there, under that tree, whatever the tree was, I can't remember, she initiated him into the mantra, the sacred mantra. I think at that point in time he got the Gopal mantra. So Indradumna Maharaj describes a little bit about initiation here, because that was rather a sudden initiation. But the fact of the matter was that Virabhadra, he understood about initiation, and Indradumna Maharaj describes that we have the chanting of the holy name. It's very, very purificatory. So without being initiated, we can chant the holy name. We actually shed our bad reactions, shed all bad karma, and we lose our taste for the material world. We start to develop taste for the Supreme. But until the point of initiation, until that takes place, we cannot go to that highest platform of Prema Bhakta, love of Krishna. That has to be given to us through a Diksha mantra by the Guru. So that was just a very, very important point. And the other aspect of it was that she initiated him without any ceremony. She just gave him the name and the Diksha. So in our Sampradaya now, especially with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, who trained up Srila Prabhupada in the process of Diksha, we have, fire yajna and some elaborate, a little bit more of an elaborate ceremony. That normally is our custom, which we preserve. But at other point in times, we have seen that Srila Prabhupada has, in extraordinary circumstances, awarded Diksha to some people. I remember one story, Krishna Rupa might know this one, that there was some very nice Indian gentleman that just somehow or other ambushed Prabhupada somewhere, and he said, Prabhupada, I've just been chanting Hare Krishna for so many years and I want to take shelter of you. And Srila Prabhupada took his beads and he chanted on his beads and he gave them back to him. And so that was considered Diksha, right? And there was another one story, in the early days, they were in Mayapur and Vishnujan Swami was there and they were doing preaching and they were going down the Ganga in a boat and they were giving out japa to all the residents in the village. They ran out of books, so they reported this to Prabhupada. They come back, Prabhupada, we've been going up, and we ran out of books, but we have a lot of beads. And we've been giving out the japa beads to everybody and showing how to chant on the japa. And Prabhupada goes, oh, you've been doing that? Well, that is a little bit risky there because you've become their spiritual master. You have to be careful of this. Right? So just sort of gave him a little bit of a slight admonishment that actually that is the process. So that is a process that is there. So having said that, so Virabhadra, he got initiation from Janavamata. That was his spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada talks in the purport there. And then as he grew up, he very early age explained to his friends again that I would like to be married now. And people say, well, if he's so much chanting and he's so much absorbed in his bhajana, why would he need to get married? But he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead always has a consort, just like if you look at Radha and Krishna, they're eternally associated. Ram-lila, Ram and Sita, Lakshmi and Narayan, so many examples. So, of course, he was a Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he was looking for Lakshmi. He was Narayan, he was looking for Lakshmi. So he said, I'm going to Jagannath Puri to find my wife. So it was a 30-day trek at that point in time, approximately, from Navadvip to Jagannath Puri. So he went to Jagannath Puri looking for his Lakshmi, and one day when he got to Jagannath Puri, his fame had already preceded him, and there were thousands of devotees who were waiting to meet him in Jagannath Puri, rousing kirtan, and he was actually accepted. Like when devotees saw him, they saw the gait, they saw the dancing, they saw the chanting, they saw the beautiful effulgent personality, and they were all saying he's just like Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So that was the potency of Virabhadra. And one day he was walking along the seashore, as people often do, and he came to this little cottage. There's a poor Brahmana lived in the cottage there, and let me see, I'm just trying to get his name here. His name was Sudamoya. So he's a very, very poor Brahmana. He knocked on the door of the Brahmana's house, and the Brahmana opened the door, and there's Virabhadra standing there. He was overawed, paid his obeisances, and he said, "Dear sir, what have you kept for me? Could you please bring it to me now?" And the Brahmana says, "I'm just a poor Brahmana. What could I possibly give you? But you're quite welcome to come inside and have a look." And so it went inside, and the Brahmana's daughter was there, his young daughter. She was worshipping Shalagram Shila, she was putting tulsi and sandal paste on Shalagram Shila. And that was the goddess of fortune, Narayani. So, Supreme Personality of God incarnate that met is Narayani. And the poor Brahmin was overjoyed. So, well, he's going to have Virabhadra as his son. Then there's one hitch. He goes, my dear Lord, you usually when you give a daughter away you have to give a dowry, but I have nothing. All I can offer you is 5 haritaki fruits. That's all I can give you. Has anybody tried the haritaki fruit? Apparently they're prominent in Jagannath Puri, haritaki fruits. So Virabhadra said, okay, that will do. So on the day, it was a big wedding because the word spread and it was all set up. It was a huge wedding and there were so many guests there. And there was one particular guest in the corner that nobody could recognise, and they were looking at him. And somebody said, I saw him walk out of the ocean. And that particular guest was Varuna Dev. He came for the wedding. And he came up to Virabhadra and he said that actually I am very, totally very blessed to see that you are, to see this, to have your darshan, see Supreme Person of Godhead, marry Lakshmi Dev, and I will supply the dowry. So immediately before Virabhadra manifested all these priceless jewels and rubies and anything that one could actually desire in the material world, as well as lots of fruits and so many other things right before his eyes. So he supplied the dowry. And then he also had the privilege of dressing up Virabhadra for the wedding. And another incarnation came to dress up Narayani, and that was Mohini Murti. She appeared and she dressed up Mohini Murti, and then all the celestials started to come, and it was just this spectacular wedding. And after the wedding, there was it was a spectacular wedding. What can you say? And then after the wedding, they decided to go back to Bengal. So at that point in time, there was this beautiful, he had a beautiful palanquin, and it said that there was chanting 24/7 all the way back to Bengal. And the devotees that were chanting were chanting so loudly that they were chanting ecstatically. Anyway, they went back to Bengal. I was just mixing up the stories here. There was a Rawadin Kirtan all the way back. So they come back there, and then Virabhadra began his preaching. So he was very much renowned for the strength of his preaching, and he preached all over South India. So I didn't want to discuss that story at this point in time, and there's another 3 or 4 slokas talking about Virabhadra, so if I can sort of take that over onto the next one, there's so many beautiful pastimes, but there's one particular pastime that I can narrate here. Back in Navadvip, when he was in his village, there happened to be a big Buddhist monastery with so many austere Buddhists. They were called the Naras. It is described that at that point in time, Buddhism was a very, very strong faith. Gradually, over the next few hundred years, it was still driven out of India, but it was still very strong. We can see in Caitanya Caritamrita also that Krishna Das Kaviraj, he talked about Lord Chaitanya's contact with the Buddhists, how they tried to give him contaminated food, and then Garuda came and protected that. And a few other incidents, Lord Chaitanya preached to them. So these Buddhists, though, were very, very austere. They performed so many penances and austerities that they had so much potency. And they become a little bit proud about the fact that they had so much potency, and they were giving the Vaishnavas a hard time. So there was 12, there was about 1,200 of them, it's described. So some of them came to Janava Mother's house. The whole family was there. Virabhadra was there, Narayana was there, Janava Mother, Vasudha Mother was there. They were living in the household there, and they demanded that they be fed. We are so hungry that we don't know how hungry, you don't know how hungry we are. We need to eat immediately. Can you supply us with food? So they put this to Janava Mother. And she said, I can't feed you right now because the Lord is eating. We've made the offering to the Lord. After we make the offering to the Lord, then we will supply you with food. No, we want to eat now. And because they were hassling her so much that she was just silent, she didn't say anything. And they took that to be an aggressive act. Silence was aggressive. So they said, well, you will be punished. And they conjured up a fire and they started to burn the house, the whole house. And devotees were running everywhere away from the house. It was a big household. And Virabhadra came out, and when he saw the fire, he just looked at the fire like that, and the fire went fit, and went out straight away. And anything that got burned actually got restored by his potency. And to teach the Buddhists the lesson, he actually manifested 1,200 Buddhists. He manifested 1,300 Nadas. They were these beautiful celestial ladies that were very, very attractive. So there's the Naras and the Nadas. And the Buddhists just become completely enchanted by these celestial ladies. And then one by one, he'd bring the Buddhists up and he'd give them one or two Nadas, and they would go off, and then they fell down from all their vows and they become grihastas. So in this way he chastised them that they lost all their austerities. But there were some Buddhists that actually saw this happening, and they ran away and they jumped into the river, they jumped into the Ganga, and they stayed under the Ganga for 2 months by their prowess and their austerities. They were there to avoid getting trapped in this situation and losing all their austerities. And so after 2 months, they were thinking and dwelling about what they've done, and they realised they committed great offence to a great personality, and they came out and they surrendered to Virabhadra, and he initiated them into the mantra, and they become great Vaishnavas. In fact, they become really, really great Vaishnavas that they went on Sankirtan everywhere with Virabhadra, and the leader of the Buddhists, he'd be the leader, chant, everybody chant, just like we have someone at the front, chant, dance, chant, like that. So they were chanting so loud, then they went on Parikram, they were chanting so loud that it is said that the whole universe could hear him. The heavenly planets could hear him, that the Svargaloka could hear him, the Naga serpents could hear him, and even the residents of hell could hear the chanting going on. I was dwelling on that and seeing as Virabhadra, he's the incarnation of Shiradoksha Vishnu, and Shiradoksha Vishnu is the super soul within everybody's heart. This is understandable how he penetrated everybody's heart with the chanting. So there is more to be discussed, but I would like to sort of save that for some more slokas there. There's some really magnificent pastimes there that this personality is just unfolded due to the, a great fortune that we have, that Indradumna Maharaj has been able to acquire all this knowledge. And it's just another colourful episode in our Vaishnava history, and we can understand that he's a very, very potent trunk of the devotional tree in our sampradaya. So having said that, does anybody like to make a comment or say anything? Yes.
So much of a wonderful class about Virabhadra. Just one question. I think it was in the first couple of sentences of the purport where it says that Virabhadra was the direct son of Nityananda. that his real mother was Vasudha. Can you explain?
Well,
Is it,
Nityananda married two people. He married Janava. There were two sisters, Vasudha.
so he married both of them?
He married both of them, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I thought that, but I couldn't look it up.
I might have missed that, yeah, but he did marry both sisters, yeah. So, of course, Janava Mata, she was the prominent one later on. We don't hear much about Vasudha, but Janava Mata did Narottam Das, when he had a great big, what we call festival, ISKCON festival of like what we have devotees that they come from Vrindavan, he united all the devotees. The Janava Mata was the featured guest, that she came and she cooked for everybody and she served everybody, and at that point in time she was understood that she was the Acharya of the whole Vaishnava Sampradaya there, a few years down the line, yeah. All right. Jai for the Shalom. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.